Gojo was never the strongest. Throughout heaven and earth, I alone am the honored one. For years, fans believed this line defined Gojo, the strongest sorcerer, the pinnacle of Jujutsu, the man who stood above the world. But Jujutsu Kaisen was never telling us a story about power. It was telling us a story about isolation, because Gojo was never the strongest. He was actually the loneliest. And the tragedy of Satoru Gojo isn't that he lost his sukuna, it's that he spent his entire life trying to answer a question his best friend asked him as a teenager. Are you the strongest because you're Satoru Gojo, or are you Satoru Gojo because you're the strongest? If you guys are new to the channel, subscribe. I'm shooting for 5K, and comment down below what other topics you would like me to cover. Follow me on Twitter as I'm active there as well, at Anime for Games. This is a story of a child who changed the world by being born, a friendship that split Jujutsu society in half, and a man who died without ever escaping the cage of strength placed around him. Satoru Gojo didn't become special. He was born as a disaster. The moment Gojo entered the world, the balance of Jujutsu not just shifted, but the balance of the world was altered. Curses grew stronger, sorcerers felt pressure they couldn't explain. The world itself reacted. They had freedom only for it to be taken from them. This is stated directly in the manga. Gojo's birth caused an evolution in cursed spirits, forcing them to grow more dangerous just to survive. Not because he chose to fight them, but because his existence demanded opposition. At that time, Gojo had a bounty of over 100 million as a kid. Gojo inherited two miracles at once, the Six Eyes and the Limitless technique. This combination hadn't appeared in hundreds of years. From the moment he could see curses, Gojo wasn't treated as a child. He was treated as a weapon. Children grow up discovering who they are. Gojo grew up being told what he was. Clan expectations, Jujutsu elders whispering, and assassination attempts before adolescence. By the time Gojo enters Jujutsu High, his fate is already sealed. He isn't training to become the strongest, he's training to survive being the strongest. And that distinction matters, because strength isolated him long before pride ever did. Then came Suguru Geto. For the first time in Gojo's life, someone stood next to him, not behind him. Geto wasn't born broken by power. He earned his strength through belief. He believed sorcerers existed to protect the weak, that suffering had meaning, that their sacrifices mattered. Gojo didn't think that deeply, and that's why they worked. During the Hidden Inventory arc, Gojo and Geto are referred to as the strongest. Not Gojo, but both of them. Together, they represented balance. Gojo had overwhelming power, and Geto had moral direction. Gojo fought because he could, and Geto fought because he believed he should, and that difference would destroy them. Geto sees society should protect the weak and keep the strong in check. Jujutsu exists to protect non-sorcerers, and Gojo says he hates this, making fun of Geto. This difference alone early on shows the dynamic of Gojo and how he sees the world. Then came Toji, a man with no cursed energy, and a man who existed entirely outside destiny. Toji didn't just overpower Gojo, he outplayed him, and then Gojo dies. And for the first time in his life, strength isn't enough. Gojo's revival is often misread as a triumph. It's actually not. It's ascension at a cost, reverse curse technique. Gojo finally understands it. On the verge of death, he understood the core of cursed energy. From this point on, Gojo doesn't return human. He returns above humanity. His perception expands. Time slows down. The world becomes trivial to him. And in that moment, Gojo declares, "Throughout heaven and earth, I alone am the honored one." This line isn't arrogance, it's detachment. Because once you see everything, nothing feels close anymore. Geto witnesses Gojo's evolution, and instead of pride, he feels fear. Because Gojo didn't just get stronger, he got further away. Geto questions Gojo on what happened to him. Gojo asks Geto if he wants to kill these people, and he wouldn't feel anything. But Geto says it's pointless, and this has Gojo questioning if there needs to be a reason. Remember, Gojo at this point does not value anything he sees. It is a pain to look at for the weak. Applying reasoning and responsibility to Jujutsu is what weak people do. This is Gojo's philosophy. After the mission, after Riko dies, after Toji exposes the cruelty of the system, Geto asks the question that defines the entire series. Are you the strongest because you're Satoru Gojo, or are you Satoru Gojo because you're strongest? But he doesn't answer. And he can't. Gojo later talks to his sensei, and he tells his sensei it looks like just being the strongest isn't enough. He can only save those who are prepared to be saved. And here's why this question breaks Gojo. If Gojo is strong because he's Gojo, then his humanity matters. But if he's Gojo because he's strong, then without strength, there's nothing left. And Gojo spends the rest of his life trying to prove the first answer to be true. Getting into the story of Geto failing, Geto actually breaks, not because he's weak, but because he cares too much. He sees sorcerers dying, protecting people who will never know their names. And Gojo, on the other hand, sees the same thing, but he doesn't feel it the same way Geto does because strength cushions him from despair. And this is the day that Gojo loses his best friend. When Gojo confronts Geto, he doesn't fight, because killing Geto means accepting something terrifying. Geto tells Gojo he didn't realize Gojo still felt a connection with him. Gojo asks Geto if he had any last words, and this changes him drastically. Geto tells him he couldn't be happy in this world, and Gojo ultimately kills him, putting his best friend down. Gojo calls him his one and only best friend, but something in Gojo dies too. Gojo becomes a teacher not to train soldiers, but to actually undo himself. He wants students strong enough that they don't need a single pillar, and they don't inherit his isolation, with Yuji's compassion, Megami's selflessness, and Yuta's love. These are things Gojo never had the luxury to develop. Gojo wants to create a world where no one like Gojo needs to exist, which means his dreams requires his own irrelevance, and that's the most human thing about him. When Gojo is sealed, the world collapses. Kenjaku uses the one person Gojo was close with, and it freezes him. Gojo sees Geto and for that one moment pauses and gets sealed. Gojo is hurt and questions Kenjaku, saying his six eyes tell him he sees Geto, but his souls know otherwise. We do see a change in Gojo as he smiles in the prison realm, saying he has faith in everyone, because Gojo does not want the power to just be in one person, but to others, as they won't truly be alone as he was. Getting into the fight with Gojo and Sukuna, before the battle even begins, Gojo is lost in his head. You could say upset with the burden that he has to carry fighting the king of curses, Sukuna. It's so much that Yuji tells him his curse technique is in the way, but Gojo smiles. Not the cocky smile, a relieved smile. He tells everyone he got this. As Gojo fights Sukuna, it's very different, because for the first time since Geto's death, Gojo is fighting someone who truly sees him. Then it happens. Gojo dies. In the afterlife, we see the conversation he has with Geto, telling him he wanted to convey everything to Sukuna he wanted him to know, the absolute strongest, and the loneliness that follows. This is what Gojo struggled with. Gojo says somewhere along the way he drew a line, not as a human, but a living creature. He dives deeper, giving a metaphor. You can make a flower bloom, you can admire it, but you can't tell that flower, I want you to understand me. This in a way means you can pour effort into someone, but that doesn't guarantee they'll understand your pain, your intentions, or your heart. And this is Gojo. Sukuna is very different from Gojo. He is not lonely. Sukuna does not protect, he does not teach, he does not shoulder responsibility. He exists entirely for himself. Like Sukuna says, I live only for my pleasure. And because of that, Sukuna is free. Gojo, despite all his power, is not. Every punch Gojo throws carries the weight of his students, the future of Jujutsu society, and the ghost of Geto. Sukuna, on the other hand, carries nothing. That difference matters more than curse techniques. On the surface, Gojo dominates. He has the limitless, the six eyes, his domain expansion, but internally, Gojo's still asking Geto's question, because if Gojo wins, it proves he is just strength, and if he loses, then who was he without it? When Gojo and Sukuna's domain collide, the manga makes something clear. They are equals, but not in combat, not in morality, not in humanity, but in raw existence. This is the first time Gojo stands on equal ground since Geto, and subconsciously, he welcomes it. Gojo does not lose because he is careless. He loses because he believes. He believes his students will surpass him. He believes the future will continue. Gojo believes the burden doesn't end with him, and Sukuna exploits that belief. Gojo's life was never about spectacle. It was about what came after him. Gojo says Sukuna wasn't able to give it his all. That line hurts because it's honest. For the first time, Gojo admits failure, not as the strongest, but as a teacher, as a human being. In death, Gojo is no longer the strongest. And look who greets him. Geto, Nanami, Haibara. Not the Jujutsu elders, not even the history books. The people who knew Satoru, not Gojo. Gojo says it was fun, not being proud, not being victorious, just satisfied, because for the first time, he lived without expectations. At this point, Geto doesn't need to repeat the question, because Gojo finally understands it. He was never Gojo because he was the strongest. He was the strongest because he was Gojo, someone who tried to protect, teach, and love in a world that punished him for it. If Gojo lived, the cycle would have continued. Another generation leaning on him, another system refusing to change, Gojo's death forces the world to stand on its own, the way that he always wanted. Strength in Jujutsu Kaisen is a curse. Those who have it lose connection, simplicity, and they lose peace. Gojo had everything, except the freedom to be weak. Now, getting down to the final answer to Geto's question, are you the strongest because you're Satoru Gojo? And the answer is yes, because Gojo's strength comes from his desire to protect others. Are you Satoru Gojo because you're the strongest? And the answer would be no, because once his strength was gone, he was still Satoru, still a teacher, still a friend, and still human. Gojo wasn't the strongest sorcerer, he was the last pillar of a broken world. And when that pillar finally fell, the world was finally forced to change. Not because Gojo failed, but because he succeeded in doing the one thing strength alone never could. He inspired others to carry the weight together. This is Gojo's story, and it's crazy to think Gege already decided on the final chapter's content as Jujutsu 0 was done in postscript. Gege didn't know the dots would connect, but it did. When you put the pieces together for Gojo as a whole, you finally understand who he was. If you like content like this, subscribe to the YouTube channel, comment down below your thoughts, hit that post notification bell for more content like mine, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.